It is 13 minutes past 10 on Tuesday, the 19th of May. Now, in today's market broadcast, we are going to be going into one of the interesting sort of topics that were investment trends last year that has had something of a resurgence in more recent times. And that was the rollout of 5G internet. So last year, of course, there was all of the interesting politics related with Huawei rolling out 5G across the developed world. And the lack of a Western competitor was often spoken about. Though, of course, if you go into the details, you'll find that there are actually options available other than Huawei. But what it was is it's the next evolution of the internet. It's the next evolution of internet speed, and it's going to bring about all these different applications that we couldn't have imagined before, just as the move from 3G to 4G did, and with the move from dial-up to broadband and things like that. Anyway, on today's market broadcast, I've got a man who will be informing us on what exactly is going to happen next with 5G in general, and whether or not the investment opportunity that originally existed last year when everything was hunky-dory still exists today. And on that note, I bring in Sam Volkering over at Revolutionary Tech Investor. Sam, apparently it's been 10 weeks since lockdown began. I'm finding it pretty hard to believe over here. How are you finding it over there?
10 weeks. Wow.
Allegedly.
Yeah, I think I stopped counting after the third week. It's all right. Yeah, it's really not that bad. Is it? Is it really that bad?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, it could be a lot worse. Could be a lot worse. But my perception of time has definitely changed in a big way. I wouldn't have been able to tell you it was 10 weeks.
Well, do you know what? If it wasn't for you saying what day and what time it was this morning, I probably wouldn't know. So that's how things are going where I am. But it's interesting. I was reading this morning about the Asian flu. No, the Hong Kong flu, and it spread in the 60s, which came about a decade after the Asian flu, which spread through the world in the late 50s.
Right.
And just the way the world was back then, and the way the media was back then, and the way that that people and the health system sort of took it upon themselves to do the, I guess, isolation and social, good of, washing your hands, and, if you're sick, you stay at home, and all that sort of thing, rather than the enforced measures of politicians and government. It's an interesting comparison. I mean, it's different. I don't mean to say that it's the same thing necessarily, but there are some interesting ways to look at what happened back then and what's happening now, and how the world in general deals with information, how the world deals with this, constant, news. I use the word news lightly. This constant news cycle, social media, social networks, and the misinformation and falsities that you find through Facebook and Twitter and all those sorts of platforms, where people create their own realities. So, and believe it or not, that ties into the 5G story at the moment pretty tightly as well, because I'm just going to say it, because of all the nutters out there that think 5G towers spread coronavirus. It's fascinating that people can consider that a 5G tower can spread coronavirus. Not even unbelievable that they could think that it's true. Just the fact that they could even consider that to be true, I think, is a pretty interesting reflection on where society is at the moment with everything that's going on, even before coronavirus. So
yeah,
it's an interesting world right now,
Yeah, when you compare and contrast the previous pandemics like the Asian flu and the Hong Kong flu from way back in the 50s and 60s, yeah, I mean, one of the sort of the key differentiators is just the ability of people to the ability of people to isolate themselves and get things like food delivered, of course. But then, of course, you get to the social media and the internet, and comparing and contrasting what other countries are doing, which you can now do with great detail thanks to the internet, which has just changed how everybody's behaved around the Wu flu. In terms of, I mean, I saw an image a while back of, I think someone was setting fire to 5G towers. I'm not
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
more 5G towers have been set alight in the UK than anywhere else in the world. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty confident that's a correct statistic. But
We're the 5G burning capital.
yeah, it's weird. It just doesn't. It I really struggle with the mindset of people that think that that's okay. Because that's a form of domestic terrorism. Doesn't matter which way you look at it. It's weird. When you take down what is effectively critical infrastructure, it's no different than trying to blow up an electricity plant. So it's a weird situation that people are looking for answers, and a lot of it's coming from a distorted reality of what's going on. But that's a reflection of how political and financial elites and the widening gaps between socioeconomic levels, how that's playing out. I read some fascinating stuff in the last couple of days about the rise in conspiracy theories. I knew you were in on the email thread that went around to a few of us through
Yeah.
Southbank Research, and the rise of conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists, in particularly in times of fast, rapid social change. And that is absolutely why I think we're seeing, the Bill Gates stuff about how Bill Gates foresaw the coronavirus after a TED talk in 2015 that he gave, and now people think that he created it because he was so annoyed that nothing was done in the lead up that he warned people about. They quickly forget that 2015 was a year after the Ebola outbreak, and about was it 6 years after the outbreak of the H1N1, the pandemic. So, it's the fact that people are searching to blame something or someone for all this is just an interesting social sort of reflection on where things are at. But at the same time, I think it also paints quite a positive picture, believe it or not, for 5G technology, because it is seen at the moment as almost like magic. It's some sort of wizardry created by those in power to control and track us. And you get those kinds of views coming from pockets of the population when there is such a breakthrough, revolutionary technology that really hits the mainstream consciousness in the way that 5G is doing at the moment. And you can go back through history and right back to with the I guess the proliferation of electricity, radio, telephone, the television, all these kinds of communication networks, and the beginning of those, the growth and expansion of those. There are always people and conspiracy theorists that think that it's going to kill us or it's going to harm us, or it's created by those in power, created by Q or whatever to keep track of what we're doing. I think that says more about the potential for it to be a real game changer than the crackpot theories that it's some great risk to humanity.
Well, at the same time, so like with the China's Belt and Road initiative, I remember reading something a while back where of all of the infrastructure that they lay first when they're building this gigantic, connection between China and Eurasia, effectively, China and Greater Eurasia. The first thing that goes down, instead of roads, in fact, is the 5G stuff. So the first thing, this is the important thing, is we need to install the internet stuff first. And I always found that quite interesting as sort of a forward-looking idea of just how important internet infrastructure is and will be in the future. And it's clear to see just how with China's super surveillance state, how this can be abused by the authorities. But that's not really a reflection of 5G so much as it is simply the internet, CCTV, and everything like that. Do you remember that fella who wore a Tony Blair mask and was setting fire to speed cameras?
I don't.
Yeah, no,
But
I don't think he was ever
doesn't
caught for it.
surprise me.
But yeah, it was in the 2000s, and it was here in the UK. Some fella was who would Molotov cocktail all of these speed cameras, and he made videos of it, and he wore a Tony Blair mask and stuff. And I think I don't think he was never caught for it, but by the end of his streak of doing this, he was he'd amassed vast. He'd done vast amounts of cost the taxpayer vast amounts of money. It reminds me a little of this 5G thing, but with 5G
Yeah.
thing, I think it's on steroids, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people are inherently afraid of change. It's somewhat of the human condition that change is scary because it's the unknown. You don't really know what's going to happen. Uh, Although, albeit with things like technology like 5G, we pretty much know what's coming, and it's not as terrifying as people think it is. But change is difficult, and that in itself, makes people cautious and wary of it and skeptical of it. But that that very very quickly dissipates when the benefit starts to roll out of instant communication. All of a sudden, networks across cities, across countries, across the world effectively become such that we step forward into a new realm of possibilities with things like machine to machine communication and mesh networks and autonomous systems being able to effectively communicate with each other, with places of residence, business, distribution channels, all those sorts of things. So, it's the benefit to market and supply chain and distribution efficiencies, reliability of communications network speed. People sometimes forget that the amount of data being created every day is exponentially growing, and that needs to transfer and be sent somewhere and to find a place somewhere, which is typically the cloud at the moment. But I think will evolve into decentralized, distributed storage solutions. And then, so 5G is an enabling technology as much as it's a revolution in the speed and capacity and capability of how we shift data around the world. It also then enables other industries to be more efficient, to be faster, to be more real time. As you can see from just the 24-hour real time news cycle, we crave instant information. We crave instant data. We crave real time everything. There's a great comedian that's done a special on Netflix talking about how things are done faster and how we want things in real time, and how when you click on Amazon, you want it at your door right now. When I click on Just Eat, I want it fed into my mouth instantly. That's the kind of demand that society is asking for, and 5G will help to enable that. And so I think while people get caught up in the hysteria of and the mistruths about 5G being dangerous or risky, and to be fair, it really is probably just a small pocket of the population that really thinks this, but it's a huge opportunity, and particularly now with somewhat icy tensions between China and the rest of the world, and the fact that the UK initially decided to go with Huawei with their 5G technologies. There's potential that could be reversed, and they'll be looking for other providers of 5G hardware and rolling out through parts of the UK and Europe. Huawei is not exactly seen in the most friendly light by Western countries. So, there's going to be opportunities in 5G networks, in companies that are involved in it, whether it be on the hardware side of things, or even if it's the subsequent industries that 5G becomes an enabling technology for them to be better. So I think the exciting thing is that while you're in these periods where there's skepticism and caution about what it can do and the risks that may be perceived to exist, while a lot of people get swept up and caught up in all that, those that can really switch on to the real story and see it for what it is, and then uncover those opportunities, you're a step ahead of those that are still swept up in the nonsense about it.
I think one of the key issues that people have, or maybe one of the key drivers of the uncertainty when you're talking about humans being afraid of change, is that nobody knows what the 5G internet is really going to look like. Like we're not aware of the applications that are going to be developed on top of 5G yet, and there's not really any way of accurately predicting it. It's like, I mean, we know it's going to be a huge change, and there's going to be huge amounts of application built out of that, hyperfast internet, but we don't know it yet. The same as we didn't know going from 3G to 4G. Looking forward, what do you think is one of those critical applications you think are going to get built out of it? I mean, you listed quite a few, like machine-to-machine communication. What do you think people should really be looking out for as one of the new sort of trademark 5G things that could only have been done with that speed of internet?
Well, I think that probably the key thing that people are going to see is the things that they can't see, and I think that's going to come in the form of machine-to-machine communication, so that effectively, there is a reduction or a removal of, the way that in which people are involved in how machines speak to each other, relate to each other, and that can come through. Now, when I talk about machine-to-machine communication, I'm not necessarily just talking about something like the arrival of autonomous drones or systems in our physical world, but it might be traffic light systems, public transport networks, providing much greater access to real-time information, management of something like traffic, for instance, becomes a substantial net benefit to a community and economy if you cut down transit times, whether it be on public transport or whether it be in any form of transport. If you can reduce, transit times by 10-20% in a society, the net gain to productivity could, be significantly more than that. I mean, it's hard to quantify really, but that's what you find with these sorts of revolutions in and evolutions in communications and networking speed like that. The internet is our kind of roadmap for what that looks like when you think about internet speeds from the initial sort of speeds that we were able to get, even through to just to today, where we're talking about gigabit speeds. We can see the reality of how that has evolved and created opportunities for new industry and new economies and the growth of economies off the back of that. And 5G is another step forward from that. And there will be another step forward from 5G, and there will be another step forward from that. So, we have the capacity to develop, and the way that humanity sort of develops and creates technology and advances technology through different iterations of communication and networking speeds, with access to the internet. But it's not just about the internet that you see when you log into www.whatever.com. It's about how, how different parts of our world connect and talk to each other and run in the back end to make industry, as I said, the supply chains, deliveries, networks more efficient, so that the consumer gets things faster, so that businesses can do things with greater efficiency. And if they can do it with greater efficiency and lower cost, then they can, that works out obviously as economies of scale, and you can expand and grow, which all help to push forward economies and to lift living standards of society. That's the cycle that it perpetuates. So, in a period now where things look pretty bleak, and there's a lot of concern and worry about the economic state of the world, there are optimistic things to look forward to and progress with technology like 5G that are going to help lift us back to whatever we'd consider as normal, and then beyond that. So, as hard as all it is to see sort of the light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of this, there is always that progression and that development, and it's technologies like 5G that make that happen. And so when people start to realize that without it, we somewhat stand in this limbo and tread water without that kind of progress, they realize that it's an essential part of just the way that our world moves forward and develops. And within that are huge opportunities for people to invest and to grow their wealth in line with the growth in these technologies.
I think it's coming kind of at a quite opportune time when you think about it, with 5G getting rolled out at the while we're on lockdown. So obviously everybody is now using the internet much more. We're all using our devices an awful lot more. It seems to me that the 5G rollout is occurring at a pretty good time, because as you say, all the productivity gains that are going to come with that are going to come at a time when we've seen huge amounts of unemployment. So the digital economy is going to should offer an awful lot of jobs for a lot of people who have sadly been laid off as a result of these lockdowns. In terms of what you think is, what's the timescale for this? I mean, when do you think we're really going to start reaping the benefits of 5G for as investors and as consumers?
I think for investors that the investment cycle and the opportunities tend to be ahead of the consumer benefit. It's when the consumer's fully realizing the benefit, then you've typically already missed the opportunity in the investment side of things. So it's important to be ahead of that. And I think that right now the investment opportunities are ahead of the consumer benefit to it, or the end user benefit of 5G. And it will take, it will take another good year or two to start to really roll out and start to see some impact and effect. While we might be seeing 5G capable smartphones and 5G hardware being built into new systems, that's only really just started to kick off in the last 12 months. And so there's been a bit of a cycle of that sort of opportunity, the investment opportunity in the last 12 months. But I think it's going to really kick on for another 12 months. And then it will start to, I think, to wane away a little bit. And so I think that the from an investment side of things, the money to be made in it is going to really exist over the next sort of 12 to 18 months. And that will somewhat go through a bit of that hype cycle phase where, the really starts to get some massive awareness in the mainstream and the general public, and that will reflect, I think, in the wider opportunities in the investment markets. And then some heat will come out of it, I would expect, until 5G is just so people aren't freaking out about Wi-Fi anymore, right? Or some people are, but it's just a way of life, and it will just be a way of life. And it's at that point, you don't want to be looking to invest at that point. You've missed the boat by then. Now is the time to really start to leverage into, not leverage, but now is the time to really start to get your information together and find and invest in the opportunities that are going to drive this forward over the next 12 to 18 months.
Well, I think that's a very good synopsis of the investment proposition for 5G in general. Sam, any closing remarks on 5G? I think we'll wind it down there for today. Of course, we shall have you back on the podcast in good time.
Sure. Look, final thoughts. Just when you just like I say, take the information that's available out there. You've really got to be smart about where you get it from and how you consume it, and don't buy into necessarily all the crazies that are out there spurting out what they believe to be fact, but are in fact falsities. 5G is not something to be afraid of. 5G is a huge opportunity for investors and for industry, and you either see it or you're out there burning down 5G towers with the rest of the nutters. So,
That was Sam Volkering over at Revolutionary Tech Investor. A very interesting insight into 5G as we're all locked down and using the internet all the time. And it'll be very interesting to see just how the internet really changes once 5G is thoroughly rolled out. And that's not including all of the geopolitics that follows it as well. That's all we have for today. We shall be back again tomorrow with Owen Tracy. But until then, do keep safe. Hope you're in good spirits. I hope you have a better grasp of the time than I do. I certainly wouldn't have been able to guess that it was we were 10 weeks into lockdown. Though if you had asked me, I probably wouldn't have been able to give you a higher or a lower answer. But anyway, that is all for today. If you like, do give me a follow on Twitter. It's at Federal Excess, or you can just search my name, Boaz Shoshan. But until then, we'll be back tomorrow.